Rosa sits with Mariana and holds her hand. Disturbed by the talk of expelling Jews from the city, Rosa leaves the hall for some air. She attracts an admirer, a German soldier called Willi, who is a good-natured lad of 22. He gives her presents, perfume, and his photograph, and he distributes chocolates to the women. These women murmur that the officer should be informed of the presence of Jews. The words, "We will not cover for them, and my children are over there by the door, why can't they sit on the table too?" are overheard. When Willi returns, his attitude has changed. He asks in German whether there are any Jews in the room, and Rosa acts as a translator. When informed that this is indeed the case, he demands their immediate departure. Those sitting on the tables leave in silence without meeting anybody's eyes. An old man hiding under a table is discovered and removed. Throughout all this, Rosa and Mariana hold hands tightly. Willi comes up behind Rosa and lashes her across the back with a whip. She too leaves with head lowered. It's a very powerful passage, and it is very suggestive. To me, the scene represents the lack of support for Jews in a sort of a passive way. The jealousies and social antagonisms that could be easily exploited to drive them out, and the difficulty of maintaining solidarity and protecting Jewish friends, the holding of hands, for example. These are ways in which the novel integrates into the narrative a narrative of Jewish destruction and loss, and it's sort of this friendship between Jews and Ukrainians which is insufficient to prevent tragedy. As Humenna's novel drives for closure, it attempts to include all sufferings. The members of Mariana's spiritual family include Ukrainians and Jews. In fact, she searches throughout the novel for like-minded people, people with whom she can speak freely, strong and upright citizens who identify with Ukraine. So the loss of the rabbi, of Clara, of Rosa represent the destruction of part of this family. At the closing of the novel's first section, Mariana returns to the deserted apartment of the rabbi and Clara. She also spends much of the remaining two sections in the apartment of a Jewish family and then of Rosa's, who's perished in the Holocaust. During this time, she tries to reconstruct the lives of the former occupants, to mourn their fate. However, not only has Rosa been murdered by the Nazis, her friend Vasanta, the communist sympathizer, has also been murdered by them. And so has Olena Peliha, the nationalist. Mariana's spiritual family, her imagined nation, includes all these. Indeed, all who through the millennia have lived on the land and suffered its ruins, as she says, colonizations, fusions, cross-pollinations, subjugations. She insists that the basic inhabitants of the land have been rooted to soil, have survived past horrors, and they will survive present horrors. Only the admixtures changed. Whoever wanted rode him, the basic inhabitant, and he survived everything. Mariana, we are informed, continues the life of this eternal commoner, this eternal Ukrainian. In this way, the novel grapples with the issue of who constitutes family, who constitutes nation, how to develop an inclusive identity, how you can construct this inclusive identity. The writer's concept of community stretches racial and national categories to the point of dissolving them. In both the novel and the diary, she invokes the Tripilians, the Scythians, the Polovtsians, the Jews, and other races, all who have lived on the land, all who have left their mark on the people and the culture of today's Ukraine. This view of nation and patria differs from the uncomplicated concept of a homogeneous ethnos to which some nationalists subscribed. Moreover, Humenna does not idolize romantic or abstract notions of the folk. And this is the second passage. This is a very powerful passage that I want to read to you. It's really a remarkable passage. I've never read anything quite like it. It's an eyewitness account. One of the characters narrates this, and this is what he says. So towards the end of the novel, narrated by a character called Hnat. One day, two very well brought-up young men came to the house. They were courteous, rosy-cheeked, with innocent blue eyes, obviously from a nice family. They asked very modestly for permission to have breakfast. They were so well-behaved and modest that they asked for nothing. They had everything they needed. During breakfast, all men in the small town were ordered to immediately gather in the square, so that the old man had to run off without eating anything. The well-behaved young men offered to help the people of the house by taking breakfast to the father. You can always tell that old, time-honored culture with its respect for elders. They went, and then the women and children were also told to gather. In the middle of the square, all the men of the small town and village were standing in line, surrounded by SS platoons. Every 10th man was selected and told to stand aside. The father was among them. These selected men were to be hanged. The Ukrainian policemen were to do this, but they shook with fear. Their hands trembled. One fainted. Another began to cry. They were unable to do it. Then these two well-behaved young men with innocent blue eyes, well-bred specialists in hanging, pushed aside the incompetent, useless policemen and expertly, professionally, quickly hung those who had been selected, including the old man. The people, women and children were surrounded to prevent them from running away and to force them to watch their relatives being hanged. There were cries to the heavens, sobbing. They went mad, turned grey. How do you like my story? It is true, because the old man hung by the sentimental, romantic youth was my father. So this is a very powerful and very interesting passage. It's a particularly powerful passage and particularly interesting, I think, for the way it exposes instrumental rationality, the technological approach to the machinery of destruction. Industrialized mass murder becomes possible only once it can be reduced to bureaucratic technical problems, which become the focus of ordinary people involved in its execution.